All right, let's talk about something we all lived through, the pandemic. Remember when suddenly, almost overnight, college went completely online? I think most of us, myself included, figured it was going to be a disaster for students, right? I mean, endless distractions, total isolation, and grades just tanking. But what if that's not the whole story? What if what actually happened was way more complicated and, believe it or not, in some cases, a lot better? Yeah, just think back to that time. I mean, the news was just full of these stories of students struggling. So it begs a really simple question, doesn't it? When millions of college kids were forced to trade lecture halls for their childhood bedrooms, what really happened with their grades?
Okay, get ready for this because the answer, which comes from a huge study out of China, is kind of mind blowing. On average math scores, they didn't drop. They didn't even stay flat. No, they went up by a whopping 11 points on a 100-point scale. Seriously. So, what in the world was going on here?
Well, this incredible insight comes from what researchers call a natural experiment. Basically, nobody planned for this to happen, obviously. But the pandemic itself created this perfect real world laboratory. It gave them this unbelievable opportunity to study what happens when you suddenly force everyone online all at once.
And we're not talking about a small sample size here. The scale of this thing is just incredible. I mean, look at this. The researchers dug into data from nearly 8,000 undergraduate students across 9 different universities. They had 4 whole semesters of grades, both before and during the pandemic, which gave them the perfect before and after picture to see exactly what changed. That's why these findings are so powerful.
Okay, so here's where it gets really, really interesting. The first big surprise from the data was that this boost from online learning, well, it wasn't the same for everyone. It turns out that the specific type of lockdown policies that were in place had a massive, and honestly, a kind of weird impact on how well students did. Now, you'd think any kind of restriction would be bad for learning, right? But nope, that's not what they found. It turns out that really strict stay-at-home orders actually hurt grades. But, and this is the crazy part, closing workplaces and shutting down public transport, that actually helped students. So why the huge difference? Well, the researchers figured it out. Those super strict stay-at-home orders just jacked up students' stress and anxiety levels, making it really hard to concentrate. But on the flip side, when workplaces closed, it often meant parents were home, maybe providing a bit more structure. And shutting down buses and trains, that just meant fewer outside distractions, pulling students away from their work. Makes sense when you think about it.
Okay, so the type of lockdown mattered. But that's only part of the puzzle. The next big factor was the actual subject being taught. It turns out the course itself played a huge role in whether going online was a win or a bust.
And wow, this really shows you the difference in black and white. You can see the comparison here between two very different kinds of classes. For a subject like math, which is all about reasoning and logic, the improvement in scores was massive. But for a subject like English, which is more about interpretation and discussion, yeah, the benefit was way, way smaller. I mean, the numbers really tell the story. An average jump of 12 points in math compared to just 4 points in English? So what does that tell us? It seems like subjects with clear-cut problems and right or wrong answers, things you can practice over and over by rewatching a lecture, they work great online. But subjects that really need that back and forth, that live, nuanced discussion, that's a lot harder to pull off through a screen. All right, so we've got the right policies, we've picked the right subjects, but there was still one giant piece of the puzzle missing. And honestly, it turned out to be the single biggest downside of this whole thing, and that was losing your friends. And the researchers had a really clever way of trying to measure this. They created what they called a peer metric. You can think of it like a study buddy score. They looked at how many of your classmates in your dorm and administrative group were from your same hometown and were the same gender, using that as a stand-in for how big your real-life social circle probably was. And their conclusion on this point? It was crystal clear. The study says it right here. Losing those day-to-day, face-to-face interactions with your peers, it massively cuts into any of the benefits you get from online education. For some, it even wiped out the benefits completely. And for certain students, this was just devastating. The study found that if you were a student at a top university with a big group of friends, the damage from losing that social network was so bad, it actually outweighed all the other benefits of online classes. For them, the whole switch was a total net negative. So where does all of this leave us? Well, with a much, much clearer picture.
It's obvious that online learning isn't just good or bad. Its success really depends on this tricky balance of different factors. And that actually gives us some really powerful lessons for how we should think about the future of education.
So, what are the big takeaways here? Well, there are three. First, you've got to tailor the format to the subject. One size does not fit all. Second, the home environment matters a lot. We have to create supportive situations for students because outside stress has a direct impact on their learning. And third, and this might be the most important one, you can't just hope for social connections to happen. You have to actively, intentionally build them into the online experience.
This whole massive, unplanned experiment taught us that online learning can be a surprisingly powerful tool, way more effective than many of us ever thought. But it also shined a huge spotlight on the one thing technology struggles with, the simple, irreplaceable value of just being around other people. So I guess the big question we're left with is, can a screen ever truly replace a campus?